The desert was black that night. Not quiet, never quiet, but still. The kind of stillness that holds its breath before something goes terribly wrong. The rotor blades of 8 U.S. helicopters tore through that silence like ghosts screaming in the dark, their thunder swallowed by the endless sands of eastern Iran. They flew low, invisible, hugging the ground. The mission had no name on the radio, only a code. Operation Eagle Claw. Inside those helicopters sat men who knew the odds. Special operations soldiers, Delta Force operators, Air Force pilots, Marines, Rangers. Each one hand-picked for a job that was as impossible as it was necessary. They were heading into the heart of a revolution to bring home 52 Americans held hostage in Tehran. Nobody expected it to be easy, but no one imagined the nightmare waiting in the desert. The air was thick with sand. Not just dust, the kind of fine, choking storm that swallows everything. It crept into engines, burned eyes, and blurred the horizon until even the moon disappeared. Inside the cockpit, visibility dropped to nothing. Instruments glowed red. Warning lights blinked. The pilots fought to stay airborne, blind in the storm, trusting only the faint echo of their instruments and the voice of God. One helicopter went down, lost in the haze. Another turned back. Fuel gauges dropped. Radios crackled. The mission began to unravel before it even reached the first waypoint. They called it Desert 1, a lonely stretch of Iranian desert, flat and empty, chosen as the first staging ground. But when the remaining aircraft finally touched down, it was chaos in slow motion. Engines hissed, sand whipped, and the night filled with the sound of men shouting over the roar of machines. The plan had been timed to the second: refuel, load, move out. But now the clock was broken. One helicopter limped in late. Another was grounded with a hydraulic failure. And when the commander looked at his numbers, the math was merciless. Only 5 aircraft left operational. They needed 6 to continue. The mission was dead. No one said it aloud, but they all felt it. The crushing silence of failure. Still, these were not men who quit easily. They began to prepare for extraction. The hostages would remain in Tehran, for now. But even retreat is dangerous when the desert turns against you. Dust swirled around the fuel trucks. Men moved fast, refueling the planes, shouting orders, scanning the horizon. The faint outline of dawn began to bleed into the sky. Every minute there made discovery more likely. Then it happened. A sudden burst of flame, a blinding flash, and in an instant, the desert erupted. A helicopter's rotor caught a transport plane's wing. The explosion ripped through the night like the hand of God striking the earth. Fuel tanks ignited, metal screamed, fire swallowed men, machines, everything. The survivors dove into the sand. The heat was unbearable. Ammunition cooked off in the flames. Someone yelled a name, but the answer was only the roar of burning fuel. In that moment, all plans, all precision, all courage collapsed into chaos. The men scrambled to pull bodies from the wreckage, arms burned, lungs seared with smoke. They knew what they had to leave behind. They destroyed classified papers, set fire to what couldn't be saved, and in the rising light of dawn, they fled. 8 Americans would not make it home. Their names were read quietly later, in rooms far from the desert. They hadn't even reached Tehran. They never had a chance to save the hostages. But what they gave that night was something else, something harder to measure. Because courage doesn't only live in victory. Sometimes it lives in the choice to go, even when the odds say you won't come back. The operation was over. But the echoes of Desert 1 would ripple for decades. It was a wound carved deep into the American psyche. A reminder that even the best trained, best equipped force in the world can be humbled by nature, chance, and human error. Back home, the country watched in silence as grainy photos appeared in newspapers. Wrecked aircraft scattered across the Iranian desert, black smoke rising into the dawn. It was more than failure. It was humiliation. But for the men who lived it, it wasn't politics. It was memory. The smell of burning jet fuel, the sound of boots crunching on sand, the faces of friends they couldn't save. The mission had been born in desperation. The U.S. Embassy in Tehran had fallen to angry crowds months earlier. Americans taken hostage, blindfolded, paraded before cameras. Diplomacy had failed. Time was running out. So a handful of soldiers volunteered for something that could have been a suicide mission. They trained in secrecy, in the desert, night after night, rehearsing what couldn't be rehearsed. Landing zones, rescue routes, escape paths, all mapped out to the last inch. They were told it would take just 2 nights, in and out, hostages freed, a clean exit to a waiting airfield. But war has a way of tearing through plans like paper. The desert storm, the mechanical failures, the collision, none of it could have been foreseen. And yet, every soldier who climbed aboard that helicopter did it knowing one truth. There are missions you take, not because they're safe, but because someone has to try. After Desert One, the Pentagon went silent. It was a moment of reckoning, an unspoken vow that something like this would never happen again. From those ashes rose the birth of U.S. Special Operations Command, the merging of elite units under one mission, to be ready, anywhere, anytime. Delta, SEALs, Rangers, all sharpened by the memory of that night. Every future operation, from Grenada to Mogadishu to Baghdad, carried the ghost of Desert One. The lessons paid for in blood became the backbone of modern special warfare. But for those who were there, it never faded. One Delta operator would later say he still dreamed of the fire, the orange glow reflected in the sand, the helplessness of watching brothers burn, the sound of the engines fading as they left them behind. It's easy, in hindsight, to see the operation as failure. But that word, failure, doesn't hold the weight of what it meant to the men who risked everything that night. They weren't chasing glory. They weren't playing politics. They were answering a call, a simple promise. We leave no one behind. The hostages would eventually come home after long months of negotiation. But the men of Desert One carried a different burden. They carried the memory of the desert, the sound of that explosion, and the knowledge that sometimes doing the right thing costs more than anyone expects. Years later, standing over the memorial plaque at Arlington, a surviving pilot ran his fingers over the engraved names. The air was still, like that night. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Every operation, every flight, every mission after that one traced its lineage back to those burning wrecks in the sand. Failure forged resolve. Loss became legacy. And through the dust and the fire, the world learned that courage isn't always about success. Sometimes it's about showing up when everything else says you shouldn't. In the heart of the desert, 8 men paid the ultimate price, but their sacrifice reshaped a nation's resolve. The story of Operation Eagle Claw isn't one of defeat, it's one of transformation, a testament to human courage, to the will to try again, to rebuild stronger from ruin. The sand of Desert One still holds their memory. Grain scorched by fire, silent witnesses to the night, America reached into the dark and came back forever changed. And maybe that's the truth of it. Heroes aren't made in the moments that go right. They're revealed in the moments that fall apart, and in the quiet courage to rise from the ashes and keep fighting. Because in war, as in life, sometimes the mission fails. But the men who dare to go, they never do.